All right, so we're back.
We are back. What do you got today?
I got another one. So
You got another one. Okay. What's today's?
I'm gonna start. I've got it in front of me so I can read it, but I've got a headline to start. So
Okay.
the internet appears to believe elephants worship the moon.
Well, they do, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, the internet says it. No, listen to this. So there's a
All right.
tweet quoted here.
All right.
The tweet in question asks, "Why did no one tell me elephants have religion and observed to worship the moon? Who has been keeping this information from me?"
You're right. It's a vast conspiracy to keep the information from you that elephants worship the moon. So what's the bottom line here? They're looking at ritualistic behavior in
So
elephants?
then the screenshot has a quote from Wikipedia, which is a great source, but says
Yeah.
Ronald K. Seigel has studied the precursors of religious faith in African elephants and concludes that elephants are aware of natural cycles as they practice moon worship, waving branches at the waxing moon and engaging in ritual bathing when the moon is full.
Okay.
And then it also says observations by Pliny the Elder also note supposed elephant reverence for the celestial bodies.
Okay. Well. So
I'm just throwing this at you again to see what you.
yeah, I've spent a little bit of time around elephants.
Okay.
When I'm in Africa,
Oh, sure. You've seen them.
and I've seen them in their natural environment.
Do they worship the moon?
Well, I mean, it was during the daytime, so
Okay.
I didn't observe them at night because, frankly, I didn't want to get eaten by lions or hyenas in the middle of the night. But during the day, I'll tell you what they do,
All right.
which is sort of ritualistic behavior, like in humans. You know how if you work like a job, and you get whistle blows whenever it does for you, 5 o'clock, whatever, and maybe you meet your buddies at the bar for a beer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that elephants do that?
Nice.
I'm not kidding. I've seen it with my own 2 eyes. They go, there's this tree, and I don't even know what you call this stupid tree. There's this tree, and it's a fruit, and it's a long tubular fruit that grows on this tree. And if you let it sit there for long enough, it ferments. The fruit on this tree ferments. And these elephants,
And they're smart enough to know this tastes good.
well, and they know it's 5 o'clock somewhere. So in other words, they don't do this like in the middle of the morning or the middle of the afternoon. They wait until like it's getting closer to evening, and then they will gather socially around this tree,
To have a little fermented drink.
and then they'll have a fermented libation. And some of them have a problem with alcohol because some of them have been by local farmers. I was asking local farmers. No, I did. I asked.
I believe you.
I did. I'm not making this up. I asked some local farmers about drunk elephants, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it's a problem." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's a problem? Like, define problem." He's like, "Well, some of them stop. Some of them like drink and then stop, and some of them keep going." And so we've had drunk elephants come and like they're walking sideways through our fields and they destroy stuff while they're going through.
Just trying to picture this in my mind of how much
Like how,
damage a person can do as they're
Well,
stumbling into their house and trip over the couch. And
and they're telling me this because, okay, a lot of these farmers, they're like kind of more like subsistence farmers. So this is what their family's going to eat. So it's not really funny because the elephant is destroying what they're going to rely on for the year. But it's completely funny because it's a drunk elephant,
yeah.
which is hilarious. and they're like passed out in this farmer's field, crushing his corn.
Well, the thing about what this makes me think, though, is just we know that elephants are really smart.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even to the point of elephants, if part of their herd dies, they'll actually mourn.
Oh, yeah,
The loss.
Yeah, not just that. They'll mourn humans that they know.
Yeah.
There have been documented cases where a human, like I'm thinking of one guy lived in South Africa, and he was living out in a rural area. He was a farmer, and he had a relationship with a group of elephants for years, and they had an understanding, And when he died, this group of elephants showed up to like mourn him.
Yeah.
And and they interacted with his widow. Like they interacted with her to say that they were essentially that they knew he was gone and that they had feels about it. So
And
they do that. They also are completely. I mean, see, okay. So here's the. Okay, I've got these notes in front of me too. So Ronald, this guy, says elephants are aware of natural cycles. Well, of course they are. How do you think they migrate? They know when the rainy season's over here and when the rainy season
the sandhill
begins over
cranes
there.
here in Nebraska know natural cycles and when to go north
Right.
and when
I
to
mean,
fly
that
south
doesn't.
and-
That's not exactly. Whales know. You know, a lot of animals know whether they have what we consider like a higher intelligence or whether they have a bird brain like a sandhill crane. But even sandhill cranes know the natural cycles of the earth because they know when to migrate. Like,
So there's kind of two questions on my mind. Let's dive into this a little
Yeah.
bit. The first part of this is you might see this headline, Internet appears to believe elephants worship the moon, and look at the spot where it just basically jokes that in the classic case of check your sources, it's Wikipedia, and here's the line. It's, you might think this, and the answer of this is probably no, because it's nonsense, and two, science, because it's nonsense.
right.
So how could you possibly believe this? And then I laughed as I looked at Pliny the Elder being sort of the supposed
Original source.
bastion of this source, and there's a line in here
If you
that
don't know who Pliny the Elder was, he was an early historian at the turn of BC to AD.
yeah,
And he was a smart cat, and we actually use a lot of Pliny the Elder stuff in like academic writing.
he's a smart dude.
Pliny the Elder didn't give us all pearls, though.
He there's also a line in here that says Pliny the Elder also believed that lambs could grow out of the ground like weeds.
I mean, I'd have to go back and source that one again.
I agree.
Did he, or is that just he said something that somebody took a certain way? But anyway,
I agree. My point being is you might look at this and be like, well, who would believe this?
right.
Let's put that aside.
But it is completely believable in the sense that a lot of animals display ritualistic behavior.
And see, for me, then it becomes, so then how do you define what religion is? How do you define what religious behavior is? And a lot of religious behavior includes ritual behavior. And so,
Well, but you can even have secular ritual,
yes,
like a high school graduation. That's not religious behavior in humans. But it is still ritualistic behavior.
you
in
stand
humans.
up and you put your hand over your heart when you sing the national anthem at a football game here.
Right, that's not religion unless you have a really weird relationship with your identity as an American.
Yes.
Which I think some people probably actually
Yeah.
do, but yeah, no, but that's a secular ritual,
Yeah.
right? Or putting your hand on a Bible at a swearing and an oath to uphold office or something. That's kind of a commingling of religious imagery and secular, utility, but it is still a secular ritual. It's not actually a religious ritual, but it's ritual.
And the ways we live our lives
Yeah.
are rituals every day. And just because they're rituals doesn't necessarily mean that they're religion. But there's also a lot of rituals within religion too. And so it's kind of unpacking a little bit of both of those things.
Well, I don't know. I mean, because I don't know. You want to talk about religion? I'm not sure. I want to talk about ritual because ritual.
That's what I'm trying to get to us.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm trying to get there. I'm just maybe not saying it the right way.
Because ritual is important in ways that are clearly also non-religious. Whether you're talking about just the daily rituals of I brush my teeth, you know what I mean? But then there are these group rituals that we engage in as humans that have meaning. And I am concerned when I see humans who don't seem to understand the role of ritual, because even lower, like if you're talking about lower intelligence in a life form, even lower animals than us seem to understand ritual to the point to where the internet can think that elephants worship the moon because it's ritualized behavior. And even animals can understand the importance of ritual. Once again, humans never cease to amaze me why so many of us are trying to get away from ritual. Like I'll tell you, okay, something concrete. Cohabitation. Okay? I try to talk to young couples about, and they think that I'm talking to, here's what's funny. Hey, you want to know what's funny, internet? If you're a pastor, anything that comes out of your mouth, people think is religious, even though it's not necessarily religious what you're saying to them. I'll try to explain to young couples, like, you're playing house, and psychologically this isn't going to work for you after you get married because nothing really changed, even though you went through the ritual of it.
And
But-
you could point to a bunch of research that demonstrates how devastating it is long term for the relationship by doing this that has nothing to do with religion.
Right. I mean, if you want me to talk to you about religion, I'll talk to you about, and God made them male and female, and the two will become one flesh. And I'll talk to you all about the religious part of it if you want to. But the religious part of it, it really has more to do with how you view your marriage. It has less to do with the practicality of waiting to live together until you have gone through a public ritual.
Yep.
Whether that's at a courthouse, on a ship with a captain, or in a church with a pastor. Go through a ritual for that's the reason why, no matter what your religion is around the world, we all have a marriage ritual, because the ritual really isn't tied to one religion or another. The ritual is the ritual to say that before this you were not married, and then after this you are married. It's like,
And before this, there's certain things you do, certain responsibilities you have, certain parts
Right.
of the relationship that exist. After this, they change.
they change. It's like the same thing with high school graduation. So you move the tassel, and all of a sudden you weren't a graduate. Now you're a graduate because you moved a tassel. It's silly. Of course, it's silly. The hat looks silly.
Did moving the tassel have anything to do with whether you passed your final exams? No.
Right, and this is what people say. They think they're so smart, and they say, "Well, then the ritual A, it's silly. B, it had nothing to do with whether or not I passed my exams." So then they'll say of something like graduate, "Well, this is dumb. I'm not going." Or they'll say of living together before you're married, they'll say, "Well, this has nothing to do with our commitment to each other and all this. So we'll just decide and we'll just live together." What you don't seem to understand is that ritual is important, so important that it seems to be part more of our animal brains than it always is necessarily like our prefrontal cortex. It's something more basic to who we are as human beings than I think you realize. It's like ritual is important just for making sure that we mark time, and we mark commitments, and we mark public promises that we make. We're marking something in a way to where it'll remain with you for the rest of your life. I remember my ordination.
Yep.
I will always remember my ordination. Did that ordination make me more or less committed? Honestly, I think it did make me more committed, because now I feel like something changed because I went through a ritual. Whereas if I did, I'll tell you a ritual I didn't get to go through. Graduation for my PhD. I did all this work for a PhD, and then it was the pandemic, and they didn't do a live graduation. And I felt so bad about
I
it.
remember you telling me you felt
Oh.
robbed of this
Oh, I felt-
moment to feel like there's this culmination,
I
there's
felt
this peace.
totally robbed. You know why? Because I did all this work, and then there was no public ritual to go through to say, and I felt like a fraud. I felt like I wasn't a real PhD. I got the stupid piece of paper on the wall, but I felt like a fraud.
But
Why?
to your point, getting the diploma mailed to you or however you got it
Doesn't feel the same.
doesn't feel
It doesn't
the same
feel the same.
as
It
as
doesn't
the
feel
pomp
the
and
same. So-
circumstance.
Well, yeah, and it's a public ritual that we're all going to go through that says I'm one of these guys now, and I felt so robbed by it that I went to the seminary just to take a photo with my doctoral advisor, with the two of us dressed in our regalia, so at least I had a memory that we marked this somehow.
There was a moment of it's done
Yeah,
and I finished it.
right. And so when I look at this stuff about animals, it tells me that ritual is important if you have a certain level of intelligence, because animals are either more or less intelligent. I'm not sure ritual is necessarily as important to chickens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it doesn't surprise me that ritual is
not earthworms.
yeah, not earthworms. But I will tell you that it doesn't surprise me at all that ritual is important to elephants, and what I wish humans would understand is, if I'm talking to you about the importance of ritual, I know it came out of a pastor's mouth, but not everything that comes out of a pastor's mouth is meant to be taken as religious. I'm just talking to you about ritual, which is not the same thing as religion.
Well, let me give another,
Religion has rituals in it,
Yes.
but it's not the same thing.
Let me give another example. Last month was Memorial Day.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about this just because you're talking about the
Yeah.
idea of, well, let's just reject this because it's silly, or reject this because it's what we've always done, and kind of an anti-tradition, anti-ritual, anti-sentiment that might be in our culture a little bit. So Memorial Day, we go out with my mom and my sister and my aunt, and
You go to the graves.
take my kids and go to the graves.
Yeah.
And not everybody does, and it's okay if you don't. I don't mean saying
Yeah, no, you don't have to.
Yeah.
But it's a nice ritual
But for us,
to mark it. Yeah.
it's nice because now I'm doing it with my kids. I've
Right.
got daughters that are 10 and 5, and we go to the one grave that's just right over here by the church. We go to the other one that's all the way on the other side of town, and you see the graves of my great grandparents. You see the graves of my grandparents. You see the graves of like my uncle, other folks, and it's partly for me then remembering when I did it when I was a kid with my grandparents
Right.
and the tradition of it, sort of. But it's also then partly bringing my kids up in that is it's a moment of this within this ritual to say, oh, this was Grandpa Vernon, great Grandpa Vernon, and he took care of me when I was a kid. And you tell stories a little bit, and it's a way to connect, and
Well,
it's important in the ways that it becomes relational then too for me.
Well, what do we know about ritual behavior in elephants? One thing we know, and I mean, you can get this from National Geographic, like literally, it's that easy to look it up. One thing that we know from actual researchers in the field, we know that a lot of ritual behavior in elephants is aimed at strengthening the matrilineal bonds.
So it's about bonds. Is what
Yeah,
I'm
it's
thinking.
it's about family.
Yeah.
It's about and the same thing is true of males, by the way. When big males come together, because a lot of times male elephants live a semi-solitary life, but they do come together at certain points. And when they come together, it's almost like looking at somebody greeting a bishop, like kiss the ring. Like they'll put their trunks in each other's mouths. Like the lower elephant on the totem pole will put his trunk in the mouth of the higher elephant on the totem pole. Well, humans do something similar if you walk into a Catholic situation and somebody kisses the bishop's ring. If you look at that behavior, it's bizarre. And yet it makes sense if you're Roman Catholic. You know what I mean? Because they have a hierarchical structure to their church. So these behaviors, these ritualistic behaviors, are actually meant to reinforce social bonds. And the same thing happens in human beings. If I meet a senator or something, I'm going to dress a certain way. I'm going to shake his hand or her hand. I'm going to look them in the eye. I'm going to pay attention to what they're saying instead of being distracted on my phone. What is that doing? It's reinforcing social bonds within a larger societal structure. This is a senator. This is a lawmaker at the federal level or the state level. This is a person that I want to pay attention to instead of being distracted on my phone. Whereas if I'm on the bus, I'm distracted on my phone and I'm not really paying attention to the other people around me in the same way. Ritual, or even ritualistic, which is not the same thing, but ritualistic behaviors, ritual itself, these things are important also, like you said with Memorial Day, to reinforce social structures, family structures. Let's take a ritual that we do that is religious, but again, ritual and religion aren't the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's talk about marking my daughter's baptismal birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So we get out the pictures of her baptism, we go back through it. There's the baptismal candle that was lit on the first day she was baptized. We light it again for a minute, get her a little cupcake or something, and we talk about God's blessings in her life. We're marking times and seasons in a way that's supposed to reinforce something for her. Now, you can do that in a secular way or you can do it in a religious way. Obviously, a baptismal birthday is marking something religious, but my point is that ritual is important to people, and when they ignore that, I think they ignore it they impoverish their life. It's not like you're in peril. It's not like you're in danger of anything, really, but you do impoverish your life when you don't pay attention to ritual. And when I say ritualistic behaviors, we could talk about this as like daily or weekly liturgies of life. You know what I mean? Like liturgy is a worship term, right?
But it could be as simple as I wake up, I go out and make a cup of coffee, and I sit down and read the newspaper every morning.
Right. Or we've talked about this before on this podcast, but the idea of Sabbath rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
That has to do with weekly ritualistic behaviors. It's not ritual per se for me to light a candle and say I'm beginning my Sabbath, but it's a ritualistic behavior that helps keep time for me and helps mark off for me personally, not for everybody else, for me personally, this time is different in some qualitative way from the other days that precede or follow it. These liturgies of life, I think, are important, and they don't make or break you, but they do enrich your life in ways to where if you don't have ritualistic behavior and you don't engage in ritual, your life really is impoverished, I believe.
Well, let's just think about it in terms of kind of flipping the coin the other side. I mean, your ritualistic behavior could be to get home from work and crack open the start of a six-pack and just turn on the TV and not talk to your family.
Okay, well then that's not a help. Okay, that's a good point. That's not a helpful ritualistic behavior.
I'm just saying it could be something that's not productive.
It could be something that's not productive.
It's like, I'm just going to watch football tonight, and I might as well not be here because I don't really communicate with anybody.
Yeah, no, that's totally true, and that's
and so. And I just bring that up in the sense of thinking about what are your liturgies of life, what are your ritualistic behaviors, how are they in place in ways that, for me, like I said, Memorial Day is a way to strengthen family bonds.
Right.
If I got home from work this afternoon and drank a six-pack and just watched TV and didn't pay attention to my wife and kids, that would not help strengthen those bonds.
Correct. Yeah. So it's not, I guess, but that's a good point. It's not ritual in itself, right?
Yeah.
But it's how you use it. But you will engage in ritualistic behavior, and at some point you will engage in ritual. You might as well do it on purpose, and you might as well do it with an intentionality to strengthen something in your life, I guess is a way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to go to the most obvious one, I suppose, for us as pastors is, why do you have worship on Sunday morning?
You should probably show up for worship on Sunday morning, people. Like, why do we stress this?
Why do we do Sunday morning?
Why do we stress this? Why do we stress you should show up for church on Sunday morning? Because he's the pastor, and that's just what they're going to say. And then you ignore what we're saying.
Is this the point where we didn't want to fully go there, or is it like we?
I didn't think about going there from the beginning of this discussion.
How could we not go there if we're going to?
I don't know. I don't know. You know, if elephants can wave branches at the moon, then you can show up on Sunday for worship. But
do you want to answer my rhetorical question of why Sunday morning?
Why Sunday morning? Because Jesus was raised from the dead.
Yep.
And that's the game changer.
So that ritual started because of the fact you're celebrating the fact that Jesus rose from the dead.
And why come and engage in those rituals with other people on Sunday morning? Because that's when other people are also going to be engaged in these rituals. And Christianity is a team sport, and so we are reinforcing family bonds.
Yep.
And so when we worship together, we reinforce those bonds that we have with one another. And so that ritual is one that's done intentionally. It's very much on purpose, and it can be a ritual, a weekly ritual that not only marks your week and marks your life, but it can really enrich your life as you spend that time in communion with both God, but also other Christians who believe what you believe. And so, again, whether it's secular or it's religious, ritual is part of life and it's important. And where it is religious ritual, it's important to make that a priority and engage in it.
Well, I think just one more thing for me as I'm thinking about it, because I think you've done a good job of trying to demonstrate that rituals are in lots of parts of our lives, and just because something's ritualistic or is a ritual, by all means doesn't mean that it's religious.
No.
But I do think there's an important distinction maybe within all of this too, though, and from a secular standpoint, going back to this article, of looking at a ritualistic behavior of elephants and then calling it worship. That somehow worship then becomes this thing just because it's ritualistic behavior. Now granted, go back to the thing I said about putting your hand on your heart and you sing the national anthem. You could worship the flag.
Right.
But
some people do.
Yes. But worship is a fundamentally different thing than just ritual behavior.
Right. And so for this researcher, whoever this guy was, to confuse ritual with religion tells me that he's not religious.
Yep.
Because he doesn't spend a lot of time in church. Because if you were religious and you did spend any time in church, you would recognize the difference. That there's not just a distinction. There actually is a difference between ritual itself and religious belief.
Yeah,
It's not the same thing.
And worship. I mean, to
Right.
fundamentally
And
think
worship
about
itself.
why are you doing this? It's because I'm giving reverence, or I'm giving awe, I'm giving praise, I'm
Right.
giving something other, I'm giving something of myself
Right.
with a purposeful quality to it, rather than just going through the motions in something.
Right. So, I'm just going to go back to
Where are you at?
to where I was at before. I'll see you on Sunday because it's important to be there to engage in ritual. And no, elephants do not worship the moon, but they are smart enough animals to appreciate ritual. And so I hope that we can all be smart enough animals to appreciate ritual together with some intentionality behind it. We'll catch you next time.